What is up, guys? K-Empire here. As many of you guys know, Baal the Electro Archon is finally coming to Genshin Impact in 2.1. So I want to make this video real quick to let you guys know 5 teams Baal could potentially be really good in, as well as some alternatives if you guys don't have these characters. Really quickly before we begin this video, because Baal and Kujou are not in the game currently, I am going to be using Razor as a Kujou placeholder, as well as Lisa for Baal placeholder. So if you guys see these characters in this video, just know that they will be for Kujou and Baal. So to begin with, I think the team that Baal will have one of the most potentials on is going to be a physical team incorporating Eula. It'll have Zhongli, Bennett, Baal, and Eula as well. Zhongli will be providing a big shield for a safety net so you can just unga bunga and do lots of attack, as well as physical resistance down. Bennett for the large attack buff that lasts for 12 seconds, which fits Eula's 7-second ulti duration time before it pops, as well as Baal for increased ulti damage dealt, especially because Eula does have an 80 energy cost, so she would get a high increased damage bonus, as well as consistent electro application from her elemental skill, as well as potential energy recovery when you use the burst skill and auto attack or use attacks in the burst skill, and then Eula to do the main DPS with the burst, auto attacks, elemental skill. This type of team has existed in the past with replacing Baal with Fischl, Electro MC, or even Beidou, and it's more centered around a one-shot team comp where you're trying to output a lot of damage with Eula's burst as well as auto attacks and elemental skill to kill it with one ultimate without the need to get your ulti back again. However, with Baal being on this team, she could help get extra energy for Eula to be able to get multiple ultimates, whether for the next chamber so you can continually beat the entire floor in one go, or just to be able to have a second ultimate if needed. So the only real downside to this team comp is that if you do want the energy recovery from Baal, you are going to have to use Baal on field and attack with her on field after she uses her burst skill to give energy back to the team. However, Zhongli and Bennett don't really need that energy recovery, and only Eula would really require that energy recovery. So for example, if your Eula does auto attacks for 26,000 damage and then your Baal only hits for about 12-15,000 per hit, is the time that you are on the field with Baal to get the energy back worth the energy exchange for your DPS? Alright, now let's talk about some alternatives. If you guys are unfortunate enough to not get Baal, you could always use Electro MC in this team to give a consistent sort of Electro, as well as a lot more energy for Eula for consistency in getting Eula's ultimate. As well as Electro MC will give energy refunds, as well as energy recharge, as well as energy from his elemental skill and burst skill without requiring a lot of field time as opposed to Baal. If you already have Fischl built up and you just want to use Fischl, you could always use Fischl in place of Baal if you don't get Baal, because it's a consistent source of electro as well as minor electro particles for energy gain for Eula as well. And lastly, Baal could be replaced with Beidou for high damage output, because Beidou's ultimate at C2 is one of the highest dealing ultimates in the game if there are 2 targets or multiple targets. If there's only 1 target, it's not as good. The other issue with this team comp is Beidou does have 80 energy costs and Eula has 80 energy costs, so you would not really be able to get either ultimate back very consistently unless you have some sort of mechanic like High Tide going on for you. Alternatively, if you're not looking for a one-shot team comp and you're looking for something with more consistency because you have enough damage, because you don't need all that power buffing, you can always use Diona for shielding, as well as cryo energy refunding, as well as Baal to put down her elemental skill as well as her burst skill, and then Beidou to get buffed by Baal for her burst skill, as well as Eula's burst being buffed by Baal as well. So you have double electro, you got lots of damage output, and you have good consistency here. Now, when it comes to Kujou being paired with Eula, I don't think it'll be the best, because you gotta remember that Eula does have 7 seconds before her ulti does explode and deal damage, while Sarah's buff time might not last long enough for it to be usable, as opposed to Bennett, which has a 12-second buff time. So for those that are looking for a more 4-star friendly team comp free to play because you guys are new, a team comp that has existed in the past is a team of Fischl, Sucrose, Xingqiu, and C2 Beidou. This utilizes a lot of hits going out with Xingqiu's swords, as well as Beidou's electricity and Sucrose's swirls, as well as Fischl Oz's spits, that allows you to reset the cooldown on Electro Charge and spam Electro Charge at a very rapid rate, as well as with using Sucrose, you get that EM bonus to your Electro characters and your Hydro characters, so that you can do a sizable electro charge damage on top of these good ultimates as well. So in this team comp, you would be replacing Fischl with Baal, because Baal would allow Xingqiu as well as Beidou to get a lot more energy, and even Sucrose for their burst skills, so that they can do a lot better grouping, as well as Baal could be a main DPS for the duration that her electro conversion does exist, and when her electro conversion does die out, you could always go back to Sucrose and start doing swirls and all that good stuff. So the one problem with this team is that it does lack a real healer. Obviously, Xingqiu will be able to heal with his swords, but the reason why this team can work or does work is because Beidou and Xingqiu both have damage mitigation on their abilities. You'll see here, this is Stormbreaker, where it's Beidou's ultimate, and it has mitigation of 26 to 32 to 37% depending on your level of it, as well as your constellations. And Xingqiu will also have mitigation here, where it'll go from 25 to 28 to various other numbers up higher, and they will stack on top of each other to help reduce the damage you take and allow Xingqiu's healing to be sufficient enough for your team. So if you really wanted to, you could technically replace Sucrose with Kazuha to get an increased damage bonus on the electro damage dealt, as well as possibly the hydro damage dealt. However, with the downtime and cooldowns of all these characters, you may end up doing a lot of physical damage, as opposed to Sucrose's constant swirls with her auto attacks. The other thing is that if you do have C2 Kazuha, it would help buff up the elemental reactions in place of Sucrose's EM buff, but usually Kazuha would be better off on a different team. But if you absolutely wanted to make this team work, you could definitely do it like C2, C6, or whatnot. So really quickly, I know there's a lot of people who are trying to fit Kujo Sarah on a team with Baal, and so if you replace Beidou with Kujo Sarah on this team, I don't think it would work out really well, because I don't think the attack buff would outweigh Beidou's damage, especially because Xingqiu's ultimate will not snapshot, aka retain Kujo Sarah's attack buff after Xingqiu leaves the field. So another team comp idea is a composition which uses Baal plus Jean plus Beidou plus Tartaglia. Baal would increase the burst damage dealt from Jean as well as Beidou and Tartaglia, as well as give energy back for all of these characters, which they definitely could use it. Jean would do the extra resistance down from Swirl with 4VV, as well as provide healing, as well as like fall damage, wall damage, throwing people around, whatever it is. And she does have a good amount of damage herself in her E and her burst. Beidou would have big burst damage as per usual and provide mitigation, as well as Tartaglia would do Riptides and a lot of Hydro application, do a lot of Electro charged. Alternatively, you could replace Jean with Bennett for the big attack buff, as well as the potentiality to do a Vaporize with Tartaglia. The downside of this variation would be that you wouldn't have resistance down for the Electro to buff Beidou's damage, but you would get a big attack buff, so it would be a fair trade-off, as well as Bennett could possibly be on a different team, and the lack of grouping that you would miss from Jean being able to throw people around. One of the great things with this team comp is a lot of you guys do know that use Tartaglia, he does have cooldown issues unless you have C6, and during the cooldown that Tartaglia does have, you could use Baal's ultimate and do Electro hits with Baal as well. You would lack the Electro charge, but you would be able to have a room to build energy for your team without losing out on DPS from your main DPS. Now, the only real downside to this team, whether using Jean or Bennett, is the fact that you have a very big lack of grouping other than Jean's throws, which aren't really that reliable for grouping people together. And using Tartaglia, you do want the enemies to stack up on each other as fast as possible so you can output more damage. If you guys don't have Jean, you guys could always run Sayu on this team comp, or even possibly Xingqiu for double mitigation as well too. As well as if you have C2 on Xingqiu, you would be able to get Hydro resistance down for Tartaglia as well. Now, I know there's a lot of people who start on the Yoimiya banner and are curious if Yoimiya will be on a good team composition with Baal. I do think it'll run okay. Just run the same idea as I just talked about with using double Electro and Jean with Tartaglia, but instead replace Tartaglia with something like Yoimiya. You can also replace Jean with something like Bennett to get double Pyro Resonance and more Pyro Energy. The only issue with this team is the lack of grouping, like I said, as well as you would be overloading like crazy, which would knock enemies away from each other and split them up, which could separate them. And if you separate them, Yoimiya's ultimate might not AoE, as well as Beidou's ultimate might not bounce back and forth. Now, I don't think a team with Yoimiya and Baal is going to be a top tier composition. However, I do think it will be viable enough to be able to help you beat the content in this game. You could also always replace Yoimiya with a different power DPS, but it would still undergo the same issues with overloading and knocking people away from you. If you don't need as much healing and you just want to inch out more damage, you could always replace Bennett and Jean for Xingqiu, so you could do Electric Charge and possible Vapes and Overloads, all that kind of stuff. This would also be the same idea for Tartaglia as well too. If you want to go with the Xingqiu, especially if you have C2 Xingqiu, you could go Hydro Resistance down for Tartaglia's hits, although Tartaglia doesn't do a huge load of damage without Vapes on his side. So another team I do want to discuss would be a team of Baal plus Bennett plus Xiangling plus Beidou, especially because Xiangling is on Baal's banner, so you could potentially get constellations, especially C4. And if you do end up running another team such as a freeze team and don't need to use Bennett and Xiangling, it could definitely be a good team. This is very similar to the Yoimiya team, but Xiangling does do very good off-field damage and does have a very high cost ultimate to give Baal more resolve stacks. This team would still suffer from hitting light enemies, so you overload. However, against big enemies, this could definitely prove to be a very strong team. This is a lot of raw damage on the team, with Xiangling and Beidou having 2 of the highest off-field bursts in the game, paired with Bennett possibly using Thunder and Fury to fill in the gap for Baal's downtime. And hopefully Baal's attacks during your ultimate are strong enough to be worthwhile using this team. So I really want to talk about Kujo Sarah really quickly. So there's a lot of people who are hyping up Sarah to be similar to Bennett because Sarah does give an attack buff that is based off her base attack. However, based off of miHoYo shown us, the buff only buffs one person, and it does not leave a field of AoE just like Bennett would to buff multiple characters, as well as it's probably not going to last as long for duration wise compared to Bennett, just due to miHoYo probably not wanting to make another Bennett, as well as I'm assuming the attack buff scaling is going to be lower than Bennett. Once again, just because they probably don't want to have a Bennett 2.0 occurrence. And she's also an Electro character, so it's really hard to wedge an Electro character into a team comp, where alternatively you'd probably usually like to use a different support that doesn't give an attack buff, but will give other types of synergy and other types of benefits. Now, if you do get constellations for Sarah, Sarah could definitely be good on a mono Electro comp or a future mono Electro comp, because we currently don't have like crazy good Electro main DPSs, unless you count Kaching as a really good Electro main DPS, where you'd use something like Baal into a healer like Jean or Sayu, that's a Nemo, so you can get Electro resistance down, paired with Sarah with constellations, and then use Beidou so you can get the attack buff on Beidou and snapshot her ultimate to have that increased attack buff as well. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of talking about team comps, I wanted to talk about Baal pairings with main DPSs, because on my Twitch stream, I've been getting asked a lot of questions like, how is Ayaka and Baal going to be? How is Xiao and Baal going to be? Etc, etc. Well, first let's start with Ayaka and Baal. I don't think Ayaka and Baal will work at all, especially because like if you run it on a freeze team composition, you would end up breaking your freeze by superconducting, and even if you decided to take freeze off, superconduct would do nothing for Ayaka. If you decided to run like a melt Ayaka, it'd be still weird because you would overload and melt, and it would mess up your melts over and over again. If you were to run something like Xiao plus Baal, you could get energy for Xiao with Baal. However, Baal's ability to increase burst damage dealt with her elemental skill and such things like that wouldn't do anything for Xiao, because Xiao's burst skill doesn't do actually any damage. What it does is it converts your attacks into a Nemo and gives you a Nemo buff, which wouldn't get buffed by Baal. And all you would gain would be an extra source of electrical damage, which wouldn't do much, especially if you consider the rest of the team composition. If you try to pair Baal with Ganyu, it's going to be the same situation as Ayaka, with messing up the freezes as well as the melts, and other sorts of superconduct teams won't do much for her. And if you are trying to pair her up with Kokomi in the future, it could be an okay idea. However, Kokomi doesn't seem like she'd be a very good main DPS in the future, but we will see. The only downside is that Kokomi's stats would be very low, but otherwise, other than that, it would work in a similar electrocharge type of team composition as Tartaglia and Mona, or even with Xingqiu. When you try to pair Baal with any other Pyro DPS, I did say earlier, it's going to work okay, similar to the Yoimiya team comp, but Overload can be very cumbersome. And with Yoimiya being ranged, Overload might not be so bad because at least you can shoot them from a distance, but splitting them up would still be bad for any sort of Pyro character with Beidou on the team as well. I do want to really quickly say though, if you guys don't have any interest in Baal, or if you guys are on the fence about if you should pull a Baal or not, but are interested in the 4-stars, you might want to wait to see some C0 Baal testing. I will be testing C0 Baal the day she does come out, so make sure you guys check me out on twitch.tv/KaelinPie to see those tests. I will be testing all these team comps the moment she does come out, as well as I will be testing Alloy, as well as some other team compositions that we don't talk about, and seeing how good Baal really is. Also, you could also see if there are any other information about future characters or banners to come throughout Baal's banner, and you guys don't have to pull immediately for the character, because maybe some special dreams or predictions might come out, or maybe miHoYo will post something about an anniversary banner. We have no idea. The only thing I do want to say is be careful with your guys' summons, because as a free-to-play budget player, your summons will be quite limited. That's going to be all for this video. Hopefully you guys got some idea about what you guys are going to be running when Baal does come out. Make sure you guys leave a like, comment down below what kind of team comp you guys plan to run with Baal, and make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel for Baal guides, Genshin guides, Inazuma 2.1 guides. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitch to get guides and account help live on twitch.tv, and make sure you guys follow my Twitter for Primogem codes, Genshin updates, Genshin guides, as well as giveaways. We currently have a giveaway going live on Twitter right now if you guys are watching this video in September. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace!